Hello and welcome to our week 4 online lecture. This week we're going to be looking at the causes for World War I. So for your assignments previously this week, you've completed a 2-day assignment over nationalism, and you are also completing an assignment on what warfare was like, what the battles were like in World War I on Friday, if you haven't already done it. So you're going to be looking a little bit at what the fighting was like on your own. Today we're going to be looking at why the war happened. We will have a discussion question in this video, like the last couple weeks. This week it's going to be in the middle of the lecture, not at the end. So if you've been just skipping to the end to find the question, you might have to work a little harder to find it this time. All right, but it is there, it's in the middle. If you're watching along with it, I will clearly tell you when the question is and where it is and what it is and how to do it. But it'll be towards the middle of the video. Now, some of you, if you have some knowledge on it, might already have an understanding of why World War I happened, and the common reasoning you're going to hear is that there was the assassination of the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. Now, that is correct, but the point that I want to make today and what I want to emphasize is, in history, there have been thousands of assassinations throughout history. Only one of them has ever caused a world war. All right, so there has to be reasons why this caused a world war. Why did the assassination of this Archduke lead to a war on the scale of which had never been seen before this conflict? Okay, and there has to be other reasons why this assassination would cause such a large conflict. There was tension from other sources already, especially for all of Europe. There was a lot of tension that had already built up, and this assassination just kind of acts as the spark that really sets all that tension off, right? That leads to this big conflict. So we're going to look at the factors that created the tension first, which there are 4. And then that's what your discussion question will be over. So we'll pause there, talk about what that is. And then I will also talk about this spark, the assassination itself. Next week, our lecture will focus primarily on the Treaty of Versailles, and the treaty that ends World War I. And we'll look at the decisions that were made there and why those decisions ended up really being the cause for World War II. All right, so maybe not the best decision making there. That's something that historically we can look back very clearly and see that the treaty that ended World War I definitely had some mistakes in it. The way it was handled, major treaties are not handled in that fashion anymore. It was very focused on punishing one side from the war. And when we look at the causes of World War I today, that's something to consider as well. Is it really fair to blame any one side for World War I? All right, now World War II, it's pretty easy to tell why that war happened and who's to blame for it. Now, World War I, it's not that simple. It's not that clear, right? So that's part of why it's also a bit of an issue to put so much blame on the side that lost. Right now, historically, yes, the sides that lose a battle, lose a war, end up suffering for that. It's just the extent to which they are punished after World War I that becomes a problem, right? Because you have people who were probably over-punished, almost certainly, and therefore are going to have resentment and eventually seek revenge. All right, and World War II really is a war of revenge. But you see here, looking at our content, it says, what will we learn today? First off, how did alliances, imperialism, militarism, and nationalism all cause World War I? So those are the 4 factors we're going to contribute, creating tension to. The reason that this assassination sparks a world war is because these 4 factors of tension already existed. What was the spark that set off the powder keg? That's the assassination. So we'll get to that. And what was the chain reaction that caused World War I? How does this lead to a world war? Why do so many countries get involved? Right? If there's an assassination, well, that's one person being killed. If you live in a country and you think this assassination was carried out by another country, you can see a reason for conflict between the two of them. But why are so many other people joining in? That's the part that becomes, something we have to unpack. All right. So causes of World War I, like we said. Europe had experienced peace from the 1870s through the early 1900s. This 30-year period, a little longer than 30 years, that there was peace in Europe, basically no fighting throughout Europe. And that might not seem like that long of a time, but for all of Europe to be at peace through that was pretty long. Historically, they did not experience time periods of peace for 30 years like that. However, during that time period, the following powerful forces were pushing Europe towards war. And this PowerPoint lays it out, and we go in the order of AIMN, right? That's the acronym they used, AIMN, like thinking about someone aiming down the sights of a gun. That works. I think it's much easier personally to remember it as the four main causes, MAIN. Still the same four things, it would just be a different order. This has it as alliances, imperialism, militarism, and nationalism. I would think of it as main, militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Whatever works for you, if you can remember the four, that's perfect. So, starting with alliances, we see a basic, two sides to this conflict here. And you see the blue, which is your triple entente, French word, obviously, because France is on that side. So you have France, Britain, and Russia, right? Allies. And we don't necessarily always think of France and Britain as allies. Historically, they had not been allies. They were constantly kind of at each other's throats, fighting bitter rivals for a long time in history. And why did they suddenly become allies? Well, because Germany was seen as a bigger threat to them. So suddenly, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that's why they became allies. And still today, they're pretty close allies. So a big historical impact for them and the way those countries functioned. Russia there as well. Huge nation, very large population. But as we've talked about previously, in this time period especially, they are struggling with production because they have not industrialized fully. So they will struggle massively in World War I when it comes to production of materials that are necessary for the war. They're not going to have enough guns, not going to have enough bullets, basic supplies for the troops, socks, boots, clothes. And then one that they really suffer from is that they don't have gas masks because poisonous gas will be used in World War I as a weapon, or they're just using planes to drop huge portions of poisonous gas over the battlefield and trying to take out the enemy. And while a lot of your troops from England and Germany and eventually the US are pretty well equipped to protect themselves from that for the most part, at least severely limit the damage it's going to cause, most Russian soldiers did not have access to gas masks, so they are devastated by it. Their numbers and casualties from the gas is going to be, way higher than anyone else. Right? So we'll see that they suffer there, and that's going to have a very serious impact on Russia during the war. Germany and Austria-Hungary, they're the allies on the other side. So very clearly here, I would argue that Germany is the real powerhouse in the Central Powers here, in the red, and Great Britain would be the real powerhouse for the Triple Entente. Right? Britain was seen as having the best navy in the world. That was their advantage, so an advantage at sea, which is a really big deal when you talk about trade and shipping goods. And then you have Russia, which is large, like we said, but some people might assume that they're the powerhouse on that side, but not really, just because of how far behind they were in production. And then Germany was seen as having the big advantage as far as having the most advanced military, the best trained, right, the most feared military in Europe already. And remember, they were a brand new country at this point, and they were already feared on that level. Okay, so alliances, the first thing. It says Europe was made up of a system of alliances that kept the balance of power in Europe. Now, how did these alliances keep a balance of power? Well, first, nations agreed to defend each other if they were attacked. This meant that a war between two nations could escalate into a global conflict. All right, so two nations, all right, and one of them's attacked. We'll say that, for example, let's say that Germany attacked France. Well, the problem for Germany is that if you were to attack France, that would mean that England and Russia were expected to come to France's aid. So it would dissuade a country from being willing to attack someone else. They wouldn't want to attack because you wouldn't be able to just fight that one country. You'd be taking on them and their allies. So the alliance system is actually created to try to prevent war, to dissuade aggressors from taking any aggressive action. Now, it guarantees you that if you are attacked, your allies are supposed to help protect you, but it does not guarantee, let's say if Germany decided to attack France, Austria, Hungary, and Italy here in yellow do not have any responsibility to also attack France, right? That's what it says, that they agreed to defend each other if attacked. So it makes it, more difficult for someone to be willing to attack, and that seems like a good thing. It had helped them prevent war for a long time period. We still use this kind of alliance system and agreement today to help prevent war. The only problem with it was, and still could be, if action does break out, if conflict does start, it's not a war between two countries anymore. You're almost guaranteed, because of the alliances, to have a war with many more countries than that. And if you can have a war like World War I, where both sides feel like the other side was responsible for starting it, now you have a ton of countries, because both sides are coming to the aid of their allies, because neither one would feel that they were the aggressor or the reason the war started. Both sides blame the other side. All right, so that's part of why this domino effect of so many countries joining in happens. in World War One. So your rival alliances in 1914, when World War I starts, you have the Triple Alliance there on the left, which is Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. If you remember on that first map, we did not include Italy. There's a reason why, right? And they'll actually pretty quickly switch to the other side and join the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente, though, in the beginning, as we mentioned already, was France, Russia, and Great Britain. So you can see the two sides of the alliance. And here it is on the map. When you look at this, you might wonder, and I would want you to wonder, who would have the advantage just based off of geography here? Well, you got the blue, right, and they're separated by the red in the middle, the Central Powers versus the Triple Entente. And at first you might think it's good to be close to your allies, so the red might have the advantage, but actually not. Because the red, Germany, for example, if they go to war with Russia and France, that means they're going to be fighting France in the west and Russia in the east. So what does Germany have to do with its troops? Well, they have to split them in half, or some percentage. You could do 60-40, whatever you want. You have to split your army, send a portion of it to the east, send a portion of it to the west. Right? Now, what that means is that you have Germany using a portion of its army to fight in the west against the full force of Britain and France, their full armies,